In his show, The Daily Show, uploaded on February 10, 2021, comedian Trevor Noah had a trending show that spoke about the farmers' protests going on in India. However, not only did his arguments come with close to no research on the topic, Trevor has used sources that have already been called out for spreading misinformation and inciting violence. Hi, I'm Priyanka for TV9 News, and this video is a breakdown of what was missing from Trevor Noah's report. Let's have a look. Number 1, Trevor calls the agricultural reforms contentious. In his video, Trevor Noah states that the agricultural reforms are contentious because they will change the way agriculture and farming has worked for decades in India. This is because, as Trevor claims, farmers will be exploited. Well, Trevor, the very definition of a reform is to change the way things have been working because in India, farmers have been getting exploited for a really long time. In fact, at present in India, agriculture employs over 50% of India's workforce but only contributes to 17% of the national GDP. This disproportionate percentage is perhaps because of corruption and mafia that rule in APMC. This is where farmers are required to go and sell their crops prior to the reforms. Agriculture also contributes to so little of India's GDP because of the middlemen involved and the black money that is generated in India through agriculture. This is because agricultural income cannot be taxed. These agricultural reforms act as a protection shield for farmers by ending the unfair and corrupt control of the local APMCs. First, let's talk about what an APMC is. Prior to the reforms, farmers in India could not sell their stock and produce just anywhere. Villages in India are divided in clusters, and every cluster has a single mandi that is approved by the government. The official term for a mandi is an Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee, or an APMC. An APMC is a marketing board that is established by the state government. Farmers are required to take the crop to the APMC, link up with a licensed agent, pay a commission for this, and then finally sell their crop or produce. Before the agricultural reforms, a farmer could not go anywhere else except his or her APMC. Now, APMCs are supposed to protect farmers from exploitation from large retailers and by making sure the farm to retail price does not reach exceedingly high levels. This may sound all good, but the statistics don't indicate honesty. At present in India, agriculture employs over 50% of India's workforce but only contributes to 17% of the national GDP. Today, with these reforms, farmers now have the right to sell their produce to anyone at a price they deem fit and won't have to pay taxes to respective state or central governments of the trade conducted in these trade areas. The agricultural reforms also allow for contract farming. A farmer can enter into a contract with a price that is predetermined before crops are harvested. A farmer can create a contract with private players, aggregators, food processors, and exporters. This will allow farmers to lock in their harvest at a good price. Also, with these reforms, a farmer now signs up to a nationwide platform, does not have to pay commission, does not have to deal with any middlemen, and can directly transact anywhere in India. These reforms will therefore change India's agricultural landscape because now the entire 50% of those employed in agriculture can actually contribute to way more than just 17% of the national GDP. Number 2, Trevor justifies the Republic Day riots. In his video, Trevor goes on to justify the riots that happened on Indian Republic Day, which was Jan 26th. He implies that the government is wrong in building barricades to prevent the riots from getting more violent. Let's look at a little bit of context here. Republic Day in India saw full-on violence with rioters breaking barricades, hoisting a religious flag where PM Modi hoists the national flag of India at the Red Fort, and directly clashing with police. So much so that the Prime Minister and every citizen in India felt that this was just plain insulting, especially on an auspicious national day like Republic Day. Along with Rihanna tweeting out her support for the farmer protest rioters, a string of international public figures and celebrities also started doing the same. Climate activist Greta Thunberg extended her support for the protest, stating that she stands in solidarity with the farmers. Thunberg also shared a toolkit which detailed how to support the protests. A cybercrime unit in India is investigating the origins of this toolkit. And according to authorities, this toolkit was made by a Vancouver-based organization named Poetic Justice Foundation. This organization carries a clear pro-Khalistani stance. This is where Sikh separatists aim to create an independent state in India called Khalistan, which is unconstitutional, illegal, and has nothing to do with the farm laws. Greta Thunberg later deleted her tweet on this. The question is, why the sudden and simultaneous support from global celebrities and public figures though? Trevor Noah's video also came a little over a week after Rihanna and Greta tweeted. Author and niece of US Vice President Kamala Harris, Meena Harris, also showed her support to the rioters. She writes, and I quote, "It's no coincidence that the world's oldest democracy was attacked not even a month ago, and as we speak, the most populous democracy is under assault." Harris continues, and I quote, "Militant nationalism is just as potent a force in US politics as it is in India or any place else. It can only be stopped if people wake up to the reality that fascist dictators aren't going anywhere." Here, Meena's unsuccessfully trying to relate the farmers' protest to the Capitol protests that happened in the USA. However, instead of talking about the protests themselves, she insinuates that Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and former US President Donald Trump are fascist leaders. This just shows Harris's agenda, as well as the other faction of supporters suddenly and simultaneously extending their support to the farmers' protest. Now, it's fine to discourage violence and rioting. Sure, go ahead and do that, but be informed about what you're talking about. The problem here is that these celebrities and public figures really do not care about the welfare of the Indian farmer. They're only interested in pushing their own personal agendas. The other problem is that the social media posts and content from these public figures, including Trevor Noah, Greta, Meena Harris, and Rihanna, show a lack of understanding and depth of the on-ground realities of the farmer protests. First of all, these agricultural reforms have already been passed by the Indian Parliament and are now law. In spite of that, the government has had over 10 rounds of talks that have happened between the government and these protesters to come to a compromise. Now, keep in mind, the GOI or Government of India does not have to do this since these reforms are already law. Moreover, peaceful protests are fine if there's something unconstitutional or legitimately wrong with the agricultural reforms, but there has been nothing found in the farm laws that are unconstitutional. In fact, the International Monetary Fund has also stated that the agricultural reforms will open up options for farmers. IMF chief economist Geeta Gopinath states, and I quote, "We do see the potential for these reforms to help farm incomes." It is also important to note that the protesters and poor farmers that Trevor Noah mentioned are by and large not from the entire country. The agitators are mainly from Indian states Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, and Punjab. While Uttar Pradesh is a critical battleground state during elections, Punjab and Haryana are states where the procurement system for agriculture is strong. Punjab is a state that has one of the highest land holdings per farmer compared to other states. In this case, what frequently happens is that the small and marginal farmer sells their produce to larger farmers who then deal with the traders. This guarantees the small farmer with money and livelihood. The minimum support price, or MSP, is an agricultural product price set by the Government of India to purchase directly from the farmer. The MSP serves as a safety net for farmers. Now, according to experts, the MSP mechanism that states like Haryana and Punjab use is neither equitable nor adequate in providing lucrative prices to all types of farmers. Corruption also plays a large part here. The implementation of the farm laws means that these large farmers, landowners, and traders lose their corrupt political bargaining power, especially over the small and marginalized farmers, and now have to sell and procure based on legal mandate. In simpler terms, Prime Minister Modi's agricultural reforms have blocked the corruption in APMC structures and also blocked the unchecked income and bargaining power that these brokers and landowners have enjoyed for years. It's therefore largely not the farmer and marginal farmers at the protest, but these landowners, brokers, and large farmers with political and bargaining influence that are against these bills because now they lose their illegal grip over small farmers and mandi structures. In simpler terms, with the agricultural reforms, corrupt landowners, traders, and large farmers have everything to lose with the agricultural reforms, while small and marginalized farmers have everything to gain. It's for this reason that the protests are, for the most part, not the farmers, but actually the traders and landowners from these three states who will lose their power with the agricultural reforms. Coming back to the point, it's fine to peacefully protest about the bare text of the actual farm laws. Protesting peacefully on an issue is fine, but this protest is not even about the welfare of the Indian farmer anymore. To prove this, farmer unions have recently pulled out of these protests. The protests are also inconveniencing lakhs and lakhs of people for days now and putting lives at risk. Commuters face heavy travel every day, and hardworking citizens are bearing the real brunt of these protests. Not to mention, this is happening during the COVID-19 health pandemic. We don't even know if ambulances are getting delayed because of these protests. Number 3, Trevor says that the farmers will lose their livelihood. Trevor Noah talks about how the farm laws have widespread repercussions because farming employs 600 million people in India. But Trevor fails to mention that in the budget 2020, the Modi government announced the formation of 10,000 farmer producer organizations or FPOs. FPOs are groups of farmers brought together so that benefits, credit and relief can be given to them. The best known example of an FPO is Amul, which is a dairy cooperation with membership of over 3 million producers. Perhaps one farmer won't be able to negotiate with a private player, but the collectivism of an FPO comes with bargaining power. At present, approximately 5,000 FPOs exist in India. The protests occurring on the streets of these reforms, which are occurring during COVID-19, an international health pandemic, show that international celebrities like Trevor Noah are not particularly concerned about farmers' lives. The protests are also concerning because opposition in India is spreading inaccurate information to mislead farmers into thinking that these agricultural reforms are bad for them. Then, public celebrities like Trevor Noah help spread this wrong information further with their content. In response to this, Prime Minister Modi has gone on record and stated that opposition is flat out lying to the farmers. He said, and I quote, "Before elections, they make big promises to farmers, put it in their manifestos, but they, the opposition, forget it after the elections. And when the same reforms which were there in the manifestos of those who had ruled the country for decades are brought in by the NDA government, they are creating illusions about it." Now, all of us constantly engage in discussions involving our freedoms because they are part of our fundamental rights. These agricultural reforms have paved the way for a common national free market that we also enjoy. But this free market, until these agricultural reforms, was not available to our Indian farmers. Now that these agricultural reforms are passed, farmers will become meaningful players in India's free market, which will allow farming in India to rapidly transform into a modern industry. The biggest irony is that as these protesters continue to stage blockades and demonstrations, farmers are benefiting from the reforms. For instance, farmer-producing companies from 4 districts in the state of Maharashtra have earned approximately 10 crore rupees from trade outside of the APMCs. This is just about 3 months after the bills were passed. Let's also keep in mind that Trevor Noah is fundamentally an entertainer, not a legitimate journalist nor an accredited academic. His show comprises of one-liners and cheap jokes, often without context, and that too for a niche audience. This is not just this show, this is all of his shows. It's quite evident that Trevor Noah really doesn't care about the welfare of the Indian farmer with his poorly researched video, and it's also very evident that he is putting up this show for likes and hits rather than spreading accurate knowledge or awareness. In fact, the lack of research presented by Trevor Noah on farmers' protests, an issue that all of us in India hold so close to our hearts, is actually an insult to our nation. For that reason, I implore you not to be misled. I implore you to deep dive into issues and question statements made rather than blindly believe someone. This is not just for Trevor Noah, but for anything and anyone that you choose to watch or consume. In the meantime, consume a comedian's content like Trevor Noah in the way it's meant to be consumed: comedy. For TV9 News, this is Priyanka signing off. Namaste.